what's at stake here really is the ability for citizens to organize and petition their local units of government, to participate in their local democracy, to respond to the issues that are confronting them in their lives. What this amendment would do would be to simply take away that ability for citizens to work with their elected officials to respond to the challenges that they've confronted in their life and the solutions that they've developed in consultation with their duly elected representatives at the municipal level. Members, it sounds very high-minded and a matter of noble principles to talk about uniformity of laws across the state, but think about some of the other subjects and issues in which we entrust to local government, and we've seen attacks on those measures in other states, basic things like protections of human rights. We've seen in Indiana, North Carolina, other places where Houston, Texas, where there have been attacks on the ability to confer non-discrimination laws to improve local conditions and the quality of life for those individuals in those municipalities, or on environmental measures that relate back to land use and pollution and those sorts of things, where we've seen attacks in the name of uniformity across the state for commerce and other sorts of activities. Or we've seen transportation and transit improvements, again, attacks because of the argument that somehow that creates an unfair set of conditions that violates uniformity across the state. We entrust local officials to work with local communities to address the challenges, the problems, and the opportunities to improve a quality of life. Members, this is about democracy. It's about local democracy. It's about elected officials and allowing them to respond with policy enhancements and innovations. And I'll just remind everyone, when we did debate some workplace and work condition improvements here in the legislature over the course of several years, those were opposed strenuously by the same interests that are urging the adoption of the language that's in this bill. So I don't really buy into the argument that somehow we just need to have this high-minded good government principle of uniformity. This is about defeating better working conditions and better labor practices, pay and working conditions and leave standards, and not actually coming into conformity with what every other modern and industrial democracy has been able to deliver for its workers in the workplace. These sorts of improvements and enhancements are coming about because of gridlock that's occurring at the state level and at the federal level. So let's let local units of government respond to the reality of people's lives. Mr. President, members, this discussion seems to be revolving around whether or not Minneapolis's ordinance, St. Paul ordinance, Duluth, other places have some sort of extraterritorial reach or are imposing their ordinances and laws on other cities or reaching into businesses and or having effect on people outside of their territory. And the simple answer to that question is it does not. And I just will simply refer you to the case that upheld the sick and safe leave ordinance of the city of Minneapolis, in which they relied on precedent and law to form their conclusions. They relied on a case known as Nelson, and I'll just share some of the words from the decision. It is undisputed that the city has a valid interest in promoting the health and well-being of its people. Point that I made earlier. This is why we have local units of government, so that citizens can petition their local officials, their elected officials, utilize their own democracy to address the health and well-being of the folks inside the territory. This interest is implicated when an employee shows up sick for work in the city. Requiring employers to provide sick and safe leave to workers they place in the city furthers this interest. As in Nelson, we are persuaded that restricting the ordinance's application to employees who work for Minneapolis-based employers would undermine the goal of protecting public health, because leave accrues under the ordinance only while an employee works in the city, and an employer must permit use of accrued benefits only on scheduled work days in the city. The ordinance has no impermissible extraterritorial operation. Members, that's the affirmation and decision of the courts on our laws, and I think representations have made to the contrary. We can change the law, absolutely, and I respect individuals' philosophical differences on the matter, but let's not misrepresent the purpose and intent and focus of the laws that we operate under.